All right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Akhil, and I'll be the co-host for your today's session. So, first of all, can you guys let me on the chat if I'm audible and my screen is visible? Okay, I can see a couple of faces. Yeah, thanks for your response, guys. All right. So, first of all, I would like to welcome you all to this lovely session on how to successfully launch your first video game by Mr. Remon Ramy. Right. So I'll just introduce our trainer, Mr. Raymond. So Raymond is a lead game developer at Genesis Creation and a game development instructor at Go My Code. He specializes in the development of video games, simulations, AR and VR applications, training solution, mobile application, as well as backend web APIs and cybersecurity. Right. And despite of his age, Raymond temporarily acted as a head of game development for an extended period of time and was responsible for managing all the Genesis creations project at some point. He has experience in JavaScript, HTML, C++, PHP, SQL, Git, Oculus Quest, Unity 3D, Oculus Rift, Visual Studio, Gameplay, 3D animation, 3D math, networking, and guys, this list is long. And he will be helping us with our today's session. So, guys, before we start with the session, I would like to inform you that the recording of this session as well as the PPT which our trainer will be using during the session will be uploaded on your Eduonix dashboard in next 48 hours after the session. Also, if you want to go through this video again, we are also live on the YouTube channel, so you can revisit this video as many times as you want. And apart from that, we'll be having some exciting, cool offers for you just for attending this session. So we'll be having surprises for you towards the end, and that will be revealed towards the end of the session. And in case you have any queries, so please feel free to put it on the chat box. We have kept a chat section open, and all the queries will be addressed towards the end of the session. So we'll be having a dedicated Q&A at the end, right? So guys, yeah, without taking much time, so I would like to hand it over to our trainer, Mr. Raymond. So Raymond, are you there with us?
Yep, I'm here. Hello,
All right.
everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks Raymond for conducting this session for us. So
Mhm.
I'll just hand it over to you. I'll mute myself and you can take it out. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. How's everyone doing? How are you guys? Right. Last time. Okay, awesome. Good to hear. Last time we had a. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Last time we had a similar session, but it discussed something different. We discussed having or starting a career at game development. This time we're discussing how to successfully launch your first video game. Now, this one is a little bit more focused on managing your own studio or having an indie game out there in the market, managing something that's independent. But before we get started, there is a question that I do want to ask. Do we have anyone that actually attended the previous session, the one about the career in game development? Anyone in chat? Okay. All right. Another question for you. Now, I know that it just happens that a lot of people who are interested in the game development field are actually, they come from a gaming background. So I want to ask you guys, do we have any gamers in chat? And what games do you play? Okay. We have some yeses. All right. What games do you guys play? Assassin's Creed? AAA titles? Marvel Strike Force. Okay. Okay. Also, we have FPS, RPG Open World, Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, Fortnite, Resident Evil, NFS. Okay. All right. Valorant. All right. Sounds good. So we do have a lot of gamers in chat. I like that. I do like that. So I'm going to start I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you guys. All right, let me know if you can see that. BGMI. Okay, all right. So first of all, I want to talk to you about what to expect from this live session. We're looking at getting you guys to have a solid understanding and a great general idea into how to launch your own video game. Let's say that you're looking to start an independent studio, whether you're working alone or you're working with someone, or you want to have like a small company and start working on video games. This will be covering how you can successfully, hopefully, launch that game onto a market. So it's important to note that while the previous webinar was a little bit more onto technicalities and technical management in general, this one is a little bit into the business side of things, because it's very important to note that when you're working on your own video game, the moment you decide to create a video game, you're no longer just a game developer. That's 50% of it, but the other 50%, or maybe even more, is a business side of things. You're going to be an entrepreneur, essentially. You're trying to get your idea out there. You're trying to get something out there, and that involves a lot of business, a lot of marketing, a lot of concepts that you should be familiar with as an independent developer. So the topics we'll be discussing are naturally going to be market research, which is very important, game design and documentation, how you can design and document your game properly, prototyping, implementation and testing, marketing and hype, and eventually the launch of your game, obviously, the day that we, I think, all wait for as game developers. So let me again stress on the importance of embracing the business side of things. Once you work independently, you're not just making a game, you're also making sure, or you're trying to get it to succeed in a market, and that's a lot of business involved. Beginning with the first topic on that is market research. Now, in order to whenever you're trying to put something out there in the market, it's very important that you do research and understand what that market is like. So you want to know your strengths and weaknesses, the potential opportunities you have, and any competition or threats that you might face in that market with your game. Let's say you're putting a strategy game out there, for example. It's important to note that strategy games are less popular than they used to be in the past, unfortunately. I do love them very much, but it's become an apparent fact in recent times. But at the same time, they do have a lot of strengths, that they have a really dedicated player base of people that really love strategy games. They're really passionate about them, and therefore they're very excited whenever they see a new strategy game in the market. So that's a plus. You want to try to find pluses and pros and cons, essentially, for your game or whatever you're trying to create and put out there in the market. One of the most important things to do in market research is something called SWOT analysis, which is analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as I mentioned. In order to understand what that is like, I want to share with you this example on an analysis example, SWOT analysis example that carries carries on some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for a certain mobile game. Example strengths would be next level mobile gaming. You're taking mobile gaming to the next level. Your gameplay is so unique that you're creating something the market hasn't seen before. It's available in all mobile platforms. Obviously, the more platforms you can support, the better. Although that's not always the case. It depends on, of course, your resources and how much you can support. But generally, it's a good thing. Let's say it's also in a fast-growing market. That's another example. Opportunities could be something like, so it's on App Store, right? So you can make purchases or you can make sales from in-app purchases and selling specialized development tools. It can be easy to expand into different genres of video game when you have the finalized results. Because whenever you're working on a video game, it's not just you're trying to make everything reusable. Whenever you're creating assets, you're trying to get these assets to be used over and over in your other projects. It's not just going to be one game. You want to start a studio, right? You want to have something that is really, really going there into the future with you. So gaming app market has the greatest share of app downloads. This is very true. A very large share of the mobile market currently is games, which is like really, really good, a good market right now for mobile developers or mobile game developers specifically. On the other hand, you can have weaknesses and threats, such as while there might not be a lot of, you can see here in the strength, there's a point that said there's a lack of competition in roguelike, in the roguelike genre. It's a roguelike game. But then again, there's still a high volume of competition in the app market in general. So when you're creating a roguelike game, you're still competing with a lot of applications. They don't necessarily have to be games to be considered your competition. So mobile games are restricted to simple forms. I think we've seen that before. There's a lot of games that have been released that have had a mobile version, and something we sometimes can notice is that it's a simplified version of the original game. It's not always true, but it happens a lot. I'm not sure if you guys have played any games that that have a let's say a console or PC version and a mobile version, and you can see the differences between both. Let me know in chat if you have seen something similar, but it does happen. There's a lack of data, of course, on games from the same genre. World of Warships, Assassin's Creed. Okay, so we have some responses here, yeah, to games that are available both on a console or PC or mobile, and you can see, or you can notice the differences. I think Hitman as well. There were some versions of Hitman that were rather limited on mobile compared to PC or console. So when you're creating something that that's in a somewhat of an untapped market, for example, here is saying in opportunities, you can see they're saying that they're pioneers in the next gen roguelike. That's the third point. Pioneers in the next gen roguelike genre or market space virtually free to capture. So it's a kind of an untapped market. It's something that there isn't a lot of on the market. That's of course an opportunity for you, but it's also a weakness because it can mean that there's a lack of data on games from the same genre, which is the third point in weaknesses, right? So something can be good and still offer some kind of weakness in the end. It's very important to study these things very well when you're trying to release your video game out there. So there isn't enough games out there, therefore there isn't enough data, which can pose some difficulty when you're trying to get your game out there and to market for it and try to create an audience, essentially. Threats, on the other hand, the last point we have is that you have, of course, established competitors from every genre. Like I said, they don't have to be in your same genre to be considered competitors. You're still having a lot of video games out there. And if you want your game to succeed, you have to be really good at marketing it. You have to do a really awesome job at building your game and making sure that it's unique and fun to play to the player. And so on. I think you get the point. Right. Also, offers in the gaming app market is growing at a fast rate. Top 10 game downloads. Of course, it's a very very rapid market, and you'd need to plan accordingly when you're working on the marketing of your video game. Now, with that being said, before I actually get into anything else, we've had some suggestions in the background. Let's, for example, take Assassin's Creed. If I ask you guys to tell me what are some strengths for Assassin's Creed, you play the game, right? What do you think are some strengths for it in the market in comparison to other games? Let me know if you have any ideas in chat. What are the strengths of a game like Assassin's Creed, for example? All right, gameplay. We have a point that says gameplay. Gameplay is very unique in Assassin's Creed. I think we've seen that across a lot of the sequels of Assassin's Creed. It has an open world melee combat. It's historically interesting. I find it very historically interesting indeed. There's a very good focus on story. These are all really good points. These are attractive points. When I mention Assassin's Creed, these are things that people think about positively. They're points of strength for me if I'm creating a game like Assassin's Creed. And there's characters, of course. Now, you can see that you can come up with a lot of things when you're considering any game that you've played in the past. You can try experimenting with previous games that you've played, whether it's Assassin's Creed, whether it's World of Warships, PlayerUnknown's Battleground, Call of Duty 4, whatever it is. You can just come up with the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as practice, and you can look up examples online that will help you really understand the market and do a really good job at analyzing it and knowing what to expect before you get ahead and start to compete. Now, with that being said, like I said, the strengths are things like, what does your game excel at? Assassin's Creed, for example, really excels in melee combat and open world. It's very historically interesting, as mentioned. It has a focus on story. There's a lot of things that are that the game actually does excel at and are very attractive to players that are that look at the game. Just the trailer itself can be very can get someone, convert someone that never knew about the game before to wanting to play it, and that's what you want your trailers to be like, to focus on strength of the game. What's your unique selling angle? For example, Assassin's Creed is very historically invested, which I think is something that makes it quite unique. Its gameplay is quite unique as well. There's a lot of things that can be considered your unique selling angle, but it's very important that you have something that you can use to differentiate between your game and other games on the market, because you're about to enter a competition, right? So you want something that can stand out in the market, and especially if you're not a major studio, for example, you're not Ubisoft, and therefore you're going to have to do a very good job at getting people to see the hidden gems in your game, essentially. Now, how well aligned are you with trends and market demands? This is very important. I mentioned earlier strategy, because strategy has not been performing as well as it used to in the past. While in comparison, if I compare strategy today with, let's say, open world, something like PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds or Fortnite or Call of Duty Warzone, battle royales, essentially, they have been very trendy nowadays, and there has been a very large rise in the number of players that play battle royales. So if I were to compare strategy and battle royale right now, battle royale would definitely win in terms of trends and market demand, right? There's a lot of people interested in these games. They don't even play them on PC and console anymore. Everyone plays PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds and similar games on mobile, right? So they've even become easily available or easily accessible to people. Right. Again, the last point would be, which aspects make your game desirable and fun to play? And it's very important. This is somewhat of a very important focus on selling points as well. What will make your game fun? What will make me as a player want to play your game and enjoy it? You might be really passionate about an idea for a game, but your gameplay is not interesting enough to attract a significant player base, for example. So it's important to understand people and what they're into, and we'll get more into in this session into how you can do that and how you can actually try to test your games on a smaller number or subset of people. Let's say your friends and family. You can have them try your games, and then you can perhaps have a small alpha community and so on that can also help you determine things. Right. So I didn't receive a direct message. I will try to answer that question by the end of the session, but I would also recommend that you redirect the question to Eduonix, just to make sure that they can answer you, because I'm not entirely certain of that at the moment. Right. So weaknesses. What does your game lack? What do you think? No matter how good your game is, there is a very good chance that it might lack something. You can't really cover everything. You could have a really amazing story, really good focus on story, but the gameplay is not as interesting, or it's less significant. Some people do enjoy that. Some people love having a game that's really, really focused on story. I think a very successful example of that is The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. They were really, really focused on the story. Or something like Plague Tale Innocence, for example. There's a lot of games that are focused on story. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're focused on they're lacking on gameplay, but I'm sure if you dig enough, you'll find that there are things that they focus more on than other things, and that's where you find your weaknesses. Are there any technical limitations? Now, of course, that's also very important. It's important to know what your limitations are. If you're going for mobile, then your graphics may be a little bit limited because you want to support a wider range of devices, and not everyone has a really good mobile device that can render the games that you're trying to provide. So you might find yourself wanting to lower the level of graphics when you're targeting mobile, for example. What assets do you think you could be short on? Now, if you're working independently, this is a very, very important point. You're going to be working as, you could be a game designer, a developer, an artist. You could have someone with you in a team, but or you could be alone. But either way, there's a very good chance that you will be lacking in certain departments because you're not a full studio. You could have really, really good development, but the art is not as good, or you could have really, really good art and design, but you're lacking in development. And therefore, it's important to know what assets you might need and whether they're easily accessible or not. You may even have to spend a bit of your budget on some assets that you may require, or you could possibly work on let's say, essentially making your video game with the help of some freelancers at times. That could be a possibility as well. Obviously, we want you to reach the point where you're making everything as an independent developer from scratch, but that's a different story that we'll get into later. Are you going to teach us how to make a video game? Absolutely. There's actually an announcement at the end of this session. I would recommend that you wait until Eduonix do mention that. This will be about a video game e-degree that actually can help you really well into advancing and getting into the game development career and starting your own development as a video game developer. So I really recommend that you state that. How limited is your distribution? This is important as well, because if you don't have a publisher, chances are you might be a little bit limited on that department. So it's important that you also put some effort into doing research regarding that. Opportunities could be things like, does your game have the potential to land a publishing deal? I just mentioned that you might be lacking publishing, so you might want to look into getting a publishing deal. It's very important that, I'm sorry, I actually have replied to your question. I'm not sure if you heard me or not, but there will be an announcement at the end of this session regarding the e-degree to help you get into game development. So absolutely, yes, Eduonix will teach you how to learn how to make video games. Right. You can try to get into publishing deals. It's very important that you're very careful with publishing deals and you try to get something that's fair to you and fair to the publisher as well. You can gather enough interest to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. So this will require a little bit of community building. Crowdfunding is not that simple, or it's not that easy, but it is entirely possible. There have been a lot of indie games in the past that managed to be extremely successful off of platforms like Kickstarter and things that allow you to crowdfund your game. So it's a really good funding model. Otherwise, you could also use different early funding models to support your development, such as releasing an early alpha, for example, or something that's still titled in development, but you're selling it and you're using the revenue from selling the game into improving and putting more effort in giving players a better experience. What's your game's main source of revenue? Obviously, we mentioned that earlier. For example, in-app purchases, you could sell the game directly on Steam or Epic Games Store or a console store, whichever. And finally, when we talk about threats, this is the point where you try to focus a little bit on your competitors. How entrenched are they? Are you actually competing against any major titles, or are you trying to get something that is entirely new and unique and that hasn't been seen before? Obviously, you stand a much better chance if you're doing the latter. How easily can you roll out updates for your game? This is incredibly important as well, because um, you're not just creating a video game and you reach the launch day and you stop there. You're definitely going to be looking into putting effort continuously into improving and further developing that games and adding more and more to it as you go. You could even create extra content, downloadable content, things that will be added later on to add more content to your game. How much investment will the game require before it's ready to launch? This is extremely important. You need to know how much you need for the assets you require, any legal fees that may be involved. If you're going to have to hire freelancers, if you're going to have a marketing campaign, a lot of advertising, that's all expenses that you might want to have in mind before you get started. And finally, how secure is your game title legally? Of course, there's a lot of legal factors that could come into play when you're creating a video game. For example, can you use this certain weapon's name? If you're creating a first-person shooter, for example, can you use the name of this weapon or not? If you're displaying some kind of car model, can you display this model or not? Is the asset that do you have full rights to use the assets that you're using to produce that video game? And other issues that may arise legally that you need to, of course, be very well aware of. Right. So that was for the market analysis part. Now, I hope you guys have been following well so far. I know this is really, really business oriented and not technical, but I can assure you that if you're trying or if you're looking to work on your own video games at some point in the future, these are very, very important points that you must know and you must research really, really well. So I'm trying to get to the point where we see a lot of developers, independent developers, essentially, they're really, really interested into creating games. And that's a whole passion, right? That's what you're passionate about. That's what you love and what you want to do. But they tend to neglect the business side of things, and that can lead to catastrophic results eventually. So this is really, really important. If you're not passionate about it, I can understand that. I'm not passionate about business either most of the time, but it's something that I must know as a game developer who's trying to get games out there independently if I'm expecting to succeed. So bear that in mind. Next part is the game design, your game design, and essentially the documentation. Now, what you already know what you expect from your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities have all been laid out, right? You've done your research, you understand the markets, you understand your competitors. Now you're trying at this point to have a somewhat of a really good idea of what your game is supposed to be like. You're working on your game design. This will essentially guide your development further because think about it. You first come up with an idea, something that you're really passionate about, something that you think will succeed in the market. Let's say you're working on a first-person shooter, for example, and you decide to make it post-apocalyptic. You'd want to know what kind of core functionalities you'd need to attract the player base that's interested in that type of game. And that takes us essentially into planning, for the pre-production planning, where you're trying to understand your target audience, what kind of people are interested in this game, which games attract this player base the most. You can take a look at games that are attractive to player into post-apocalyptic shooters. For example, DayZ, World War Z, Call of Duty. I think it had a lot of zombie shooting modes. Rust. So there's a lot of games that are post-apocalyptic. State of Decay, of course. Games that are post-apocalyptic, but you know that if you're creating a new zombie survival shooter, then you're going to have people from all over these games potentially interested in your game. And so you're trying to understand that audience, what they love. For example, what do people love most about the State of Decay? What do people love most about Rust? And you're trying to determine what would your game require to attract that audience. Of course, again, what's your budget? Very important. You want to think over and rethink your budget all the time, because it might change as you do more planning. You may realize that, oh, of course, there's other things that you need, or there are other differences in the budget that you had in mind earlier. What visual style are you going for, and what are the core aspects of your game design? Again, the core aspects are the core functionalities of the things that will really attract the players to your game. Something that's really important that you want to put in mind is a game design document. You want to try to have a game design document that will describe everything that you're working on. So the document is meant to describe your game, and it's going to be used to guide your team or yourself, even if you're working alone later on when you're creating your video game. Version control is yet another super important thing to keep in mind. It is vital that you keep track of your game and all changes that are made to it. So you created the core functionality for your game, and now you're starting to add features. You're starting to let's say you created something like let's say you created a zombie shooter again, or a zombie survival game in general, something like Dying Light, and then you later on decide, you know what, I want to add a grappling hook, and that grappling hook is supposed to take you from one position to another. You just aim wherever you want to go, and it will take you there, right? So the core functionality in something like Dying Light was the parkour. It's a very unique selling angle. Not a lot of games offer that level of parkour, right? Or of maneuverability when you're moving across objects. And then you also have, they decided to add a grappling hook, which is a feature or something that greatly improves the gameplay when it comes to that core feature. So they essentially improved the previous feature. You want to keep track of all of that, and you want to always document your work and understand where you've been and where you're going throughout the process. Plans and objectives. You should always plan for short-term ahead and know what to expect. Notice that I'm saying here short-term and not long-term. You have short-term objectives and you have long-term objectives. At this point, it's important to focus on the short-term and to ensure that you're having certain features and deadlines for certain features that you're trying to add, or changes or bug fixes or whatever it is you're trying to do throughout the development process. Right. Next up is prototyping. So you've decided, you've done your research, you've decided the core gameplay or the core design of your game. Now you're going to get into prototyping. This is where you actually start working on your game. The very basic core features, the thing that define your game. For example, like we said, Dying Light, that would be the parkour and the movement of the player, the controls, the weapons. That would be all in the prototyping phase. The core user experience, so what you're trying to give, the feeling that you're trying to give the player when they play your game, and the overall game feel, the state of mind, because essentially games are a form of entertainment, right? We play games because they do make us feel better. They actually are a really good way to spend time, and essentially it's an entertainment product. So the game feel is extremely important, how your player feels while playing your game. This is something that the prototyping phase can very much or very easily determine. The core game functionality, again, we already talked about all three, so I'm just going to skip ahead. Then you have the implementation and testing phase of your game. This is where you actually start developing your game. You've already had your prototype, you have something that's working that you can showcase that has the idea and the feeling that you're trying to reach. This is the point where you start implementing your game. You start looking at asset coverage. What will you need to add? How long will it take you to reach a minimum viable product, or something we call an MVP, which is basically the minimum possible product that you can create with the least possible features, but still describes your game really well. And of course, you have you want to start marketing within development. While you're still development, you're still in development. You want to get marketing out there because it's very important to let people know. You know what, guys, I'm working on a game. This is what it looks like. This is a very early preview. You're trying to gather an audience essentially for your game. Hype. Are you able to work on building a community during the development stage? So this would actually involve a little bit of social media. You'd want to create a community essentially of people who are interested in your game. And the whole point in that is to get people to want to wish list and want to play your game when it's out. So it's very important. And they end up usually telling their friends, like, for example, if you find a game that you really like today and you want to play it with a friend, then you're going to tell that friend, and that friend might tell another person. And so if your MVP is really good, it's going to start attracting more people interested into playing your game. Quality. Will you actually have enough testers for your product? Because that's really how you ensure that the experience will be great. I think we've seen a really recent example of that. Which was Cyberpunk. I don't know if you guys have been keeping track, but when it first came out, there have been a lot of complaints about a very, very massive amount of bugs. And that might indicate that the project was a little bit rushed, or it didn't have, yes, yeah, it didn't have a lot of testing. So there was a lot of hype. There was so much hype for the game. And then a lot of bugs came out. The game ended up being taken off PlayStation Store, ended up being taken off Xbox, and it just wasn't a good thing. This is the absolute nightmare scenario that you're trying to avoid. And now that we have an example of a AAA studio, because CD Projekt Red are not a small studio, they're AAA. When you have something like that coming out of a AAA studio, it really shows you how dangerous it can be if you're working alone. Yeah, they definitely rushed. They definitely rushed because we kept seeing a lot of delays also. Like they kept delaying the game further and further. So it showed that the game didn't feel like it was ready, but they kept offering release dates because they were trying to get it out as soon as possible to make use of the hype that they've created. But then again, if you see this coming out of a AAA studio, you know how dangerous or how risky it can be for you as someone who's working independently, right? If a AAA studio that has so much resources could still come up with such a product that had a lot of bugs, then your game probably is going to have a very big amount of bugs if it's not tested properly. It definitely got downhill fast. Yeah. So again, a minimum viable product is incredibly useful in getting feedback. So whenever you're working in a game, there's a very high chance that you're going to be showing your family and friends. They're always going to be keeping up with your work, and you would want to probably get their opinion from time to time. This is something very common. A lot of game developers do it. Hopefully, if you're working on something really unique, I hope your friends are good at keeping secrets. But it's something that a lot of us do. The game development, okay, since you're asking about it, this is just a theory lecture. This is really focused on theory and business more than the technical side of things. But when you get to the point where we're talking about the e-degree for game development, you're absolutely going to dive into the core everything you want to know about game development. So there's a lot of technology you'll be using. There's the Unity game engine, there's Phaser, there's Construct, there's a lot of other things that Eduonix do offer. And you will definitely be getting into developing video games. If that's what you're here for, I can assure you you're going to get it eventually. So I'm sorry if this is not what you expected, but I can also assure you that it's super, super important if you want to work on your own games. So next up, we have marketing Right. How do you make games like Valorant or Among Us? You're definitely going to be creating a lot of game clones when you're working on that e-degree, and I'm pretty sure you will get a really, really, really good experience at how to build things like Valorant and Among Us. Well, we'll get actually. I'm going to get into a point that's related to that during this session. So once I reach that, I will actually let you know certain points that are very important when you're working. We want to create something like Valorant, for example. Um, right. So marketing and hype. Like we said, Cyberpunk was really really hyped. There was a lot of marketing and a lot of hype that was made. A lot of people that are interested in the game, and this is what you're trying to do when you are creating your video game. You're trying to get a lot of people interested. You're trying to build a community, especially if you're an indie, because you're not a AAA studio, right? You don't have a massive reputation that you can rely on when releasing a new title. Even AAA studios that have such reputation, um, you'll still if you're developing something like Player Unknown Battlegrounds, I think the Unity game engine is definitely a really good option for that, which is part of the e-degree. Um, how to get started, because you try to make games with the interface the interface with engines are really bad. Can you let me know what you mean by interface? Is it the interface of the game engine itself? It's a bit difficult to understand, or do you mean like when you're creating user interface for your game? The interface of the game engine. Well, it takes a lot of getting used to. Game engines are very intensive tools. They're meant for a lot of people, not just developers. So they have a very massive set of features into them. And it's expected that the interface would be a little bit difficult to learn, but it's definitely a matter of getting used to the interface. And one positive point here is that the Unity game engine, I'm not sure if what game engines you've dealt with, but the Unity game engine specifically, which is part of the e-degree, is known to have the possibly one of the easiest user interfaces among game engines. So that's a really really positive point about it. I think it's just getting used to it essentially. And once actually you master one game engine, you're going to be able to get into other game engines and get to learn more about other engines if you want to get into them. A budget to create a game like Assassin's Creed is it depends on what you're trying to achieve, what kind of features you're trying to achieve. But it is a massive game. You can just look up the sheer amount of people it takes to build a game like Assassin's Creed. It's a very massive number of people, and there's a lot of resources going into it. So I probably couldn't give you an estimate, but you can look it up and you'll see it's a very large amount. What about Unreal Engine 5? Unreal 5 is great, of course. Um, I'm waiting to see like something like Lumen is really interesting. Nanite is also very interesting. I want to see the potential of these when the engine comes out, but it's currently still not in development ready stage. So I don't think I can give you much about that right now. Right. So moving on. So we have social media. It's very important to have really strong social media or online presence for your game to get people to look into it and be interested in wanting to try it out, or at least find out that it exists. Because you could have an amazing game, but no one knows about it, and that's exactly what marketing and social media are for. Um, Advertising, on the other hand, it's a huge tool today. Like advertising is not like it used to be back in the day. Nowadays, it's a massive, massive tool that you can use to gain a lot of people, a very massive audience in a very short time. So it's important to look into advertising and try to benefit from it the most. Target the audience that you're trying to target and get or convert people into wanting to play your game. Content creators and influencers, this is a massive and really, really important point. Content creators today, people like YouTubers and Twitch streamers and a lot of people on social media who play video games, if you get them to try your video game, if you create a video game and they actually try it, a lot of their audience will be super interested in trying that game as well. So it's basically advertising. It's not always free. Some or a lot actually may require fees for it. but it is super good if you're trying to build an audience quick for your game. So I would really recommend you start sending out free copies to content creators and try to get them to try out your game on whether the YouTube channel, their Twitch stream, or whatever else they're using. Building hype, again, if you want to go the extra mile, if you have that kind of commitment for your game and you have the time, you can always have development blogs, which are really good at getting people to see the development process and be interested in what you're doing and seeing the features that you're adding to the game. So I would definitely look into trying to get some kind of development blog or some kind of updates available to people so that they know what's being worked on right now. It really helps with building up hype. How do you get to use to game engines? Definitely by creating a lot of things on these game engines. So you have an interesting idea that you want to apply, or you have game clones. Game clones are also a very good way to learn. It's being used everywhere when teaching game development. You can try to build games that have that actually exist. So you'd have the assets for them, you'd have everything that you need, but you'd be building them yourself, right? You're putting yourself in the shoes of the developers who made that game. It gives you a ton of experience into everything, including the game engine that you're using. And since there would be a step-by-step explanation for everything, I don't really think you will be using the game engine. Like, I understand the sort of fear or the confusion that can arise when you're looking at something that complicated. But I can assure you, the more you actually follow through these steps, you'll find that it's actually a very easy process. It just takes a lot of getting used to, and you get used to it by constantly creating things. Whether they're game clones, whether they're your own unique ideas, you could create your own simple games. It doesn't have to be something massive, but it could be something simple that gets you used to the engine. Right. Finally, obviously, the day that you want to reach and the day you're really interested in is the launch day. You've worked so hard, you've had sleepless nights, you're finally getting your game to launch. Launch days can be extremely exhausting. They may seem like a day for celebration, but it's not actually time for celebration yet. It will be a very stressful day. You'll be focused on so many early reviews, focused on so many things, trying to get a sense of how the market reacted to your game. So I do hope that you definitely reach that stage and you get to try that excitement and stress at the same time. But it's a really, really good experience. Now, we're already done, but I want to have a few points, a few reminders. It's important that you plan wisely for what you're trying to do, understand the markets, understand your strengths and weaknesses, and so on. Have the right mentality, have the drive, the passion that will have you continue to work, because you could very easily, you could be passionate about something but not passionate enough, and you easily get bored. You want to try to have the right mentality and really, really focus on continuing to motivate yourself to finish your game. Okay, you got to put your game out there. Learn to use social media, learn to market, do a really good job at both, and get people to know about your game and to be interested in wanting to try it. Don't be disappointed. This is a very important point. A lot of people jump in with the mentality that I'm going to have this super successful game that's going to smash the market. It will be my first game, and it's actually going to be a really good hit. That's not always true. It could happen. It's not impossible, but it's not always true, right? You could have something that would perform averagely, or it would even perform below average, or whatever it is. Learn not to be disappointed. Learn that this is a journey. There's a lot of things that you'll be creating. It's not just one product. So it's important to not let your spirit go down and focus on your next step. Know your competition. Understand really well what other games are offering and what you can do to compete with them. Be realistic about your expectations. This is a point where I wanted to mention something like Valorant. So you can definitely create something like Valorant, right? But it's a multiplayer experience, and it has so much content into it. It has a lot of abilities, if I'm not mistaken. It has a lot of shooting concepts, weapons, maps, areas that you can play through, and so on. So if you're creating a game like Valorant, it's very likely that you will need a large team, or at least a medium-sized team that can actually get all that done. You can still do it with assets. You can do a lot of assets, but you're still looking at a lot of networking and programming that you will need to do to make sure that you're having a good game that is similar to Valorant. So be realistic about your expectations. Know what you can do and what you can provide in your limits and so on, and try to focus on that. Focus on something that's achievable within, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, a year. But don't create something that probably will take you much, much longer, because it takes, even AAA studios take a long time, a very long time to create games in the quality that they do. Right. And finally, you need to constantly, you want to constantly adapt to changes. There's a lot of stages in between where there might be a change, and you'd want to, of course, constantly adapt to that. Eventually, also never neglect marketing. This is something I always mention. I know I can truly understand that this can be boring. The whole business thing or aspect thing can be boring to you as someone interested in game development. But believe me, if you want to succeed, you have to really, really focus on that as well. There's going to be a lot of fun, but there's also a lot of work that needs to be done to get your game out there. Right. With that being done, this is a point where I think a lot of you have been waiting for it. Okay, I see a lot of questions, so I will definitely answer that in the Q&A session. All right, about the game development e-degree. This is created by Eduonix Learning Solutions, and it's essentially designed for people who are interested into creating video games. This is a part where we're actually creating a game, not just talking about theories and theoretical stuff. This is where you're going to be working on creating games from scratch. There are 6 comprehensive modules with well-defined structures, 40 plus hours of game development training. You're going to create 10 plus trending game development, game clones and projects. This is super important. You've asked me how you can get used to a game engine, how you can get used to the entire process, get familiarized. This is the best way to learn, is to create clones, because there are, like, you already know what you're going to follow. You have the assets, you have the steps to create that project, and you're essentially learning or gaining experience similar to the experience of people who've created these 10 games or even more. So it's a really great way to learn. You have 5 plus development tools and technologies, 285 video lectures. That's a lot of content, and they're all provided by world-class instructors. You can create cross-platform 2D and 3D clones, so it's not just going to be 3D or 2D. They're going to have a hybrid of both. It's a really interactive Cyrillicum, with a lot of real-time challenges that you will be looking to learn to solve. You have real-time game development and design. You have exams and quizzes that will be used to measure your progress. You can use those to monitor and understand how you're advancing while learning game development, or how well you're advancing, rather. You have a certificate, of course, upon completion. Someone asked me earlier if there is a certificate. Of course, you get a certificate for that. You have expert verified responses. They will ensure that you're getting the best learning possible. Very important point, you have lifetime access when updates with no limits. So once you actually get into the e-degree, you're there for a lifetime. You have access. It's cost efficient, of course, and we'll get actually into a surprise. I believe we mentioned the surprise earlier. We're about to get into that. It's 100% online, and it's self-paced, and you get a 30-day money guarantee. Now, with that being said, the game development e-degree lets you learn game programming development, mobile game development and game design, physics, selection-based tools. You have C++, C#, and JavaScript, 3 of the most commonly used programming languages in gaming. Like, you can go ahead and look up all the game engines that exist. You will most likely find that these 3 languages are at a very, very large subset of these engines. You're going to be using the Unity game engine, which I think someone mentioned earlier. What if I needed to create something like I'm sorry, I can't actually remember the game, but I did respond to that question. You can use the Unity game engine to create high-end games that can target console or PC in really good quality, and you can also use it for mobile or for other devices, even web games. There's phaser and construct. I will answer the question. I definitely see your question. I'll make sure to answer all those in the Q&A session. Okay, there's phaser and construct, there's debugging and networking, there's mobile game development and iterative design principles, which are very important when creating a video game. Is there actually a double entry mobile game? Yeah, I actually can see that. Yeah, but definitely it does exist. Right. So some of the game clones that you'll be creating are things like Pokemon Go, Angry Birds, Legend of Zelda, Space Invaders, Road Rush, Portal, and Block Breaker. I'm sure you've heard of some of, if not all of these games. And like I said, it's a really, really good into getting into learning, getting used to a game engine and learning how to create your own video games. All right, at the end, you can, this is a surprise you mentioned earlier. We have a discount. It's at 35 degree, sorry, $35 flat instead of 150. This is only available or only valid for 48 hours, and you can use the coupon on screen right now if you want to get that the E degree at that value. So I would recommend you check the link that was just shared by Eduonix in the chat. Like I said, this is available for 48 hours. If you're really looking to get into game development and you're really interested in this, I highly recommend that you check it out, check the content, and consider taking the step to actually invest in yourself and become the game developer you're wanting to be. Now, this is a part where actually I'm going to answer some questions. I can see 5 questions sent here. The first one, what hardware would I need to start learning game dev? It's not actually as much as you'd expect, unless you're targeting something that's really high end. You can have most gaming laptops would be enough to run a game engine and to get you started with learning game development. Of course, you could always add to that or upgrade if you're looking to create stuff that are more intensive or more consuming. How long will it take to learn game development? That depends on the person, really. But it depends on how fast of a learner you are and your learning curve and a lot of other aspects. But I would definitely check things like this E-degree would actually give you a general idea of how long they expect for you to reach the level where you can call yourself a game developer and start working on your own video games. Which programming languages and game engine is used widely? Like I mentioned, C++, C#, and JavaScript are very commonly used. I would say that a very large percentage of video game developers use one of these 3 languages. And the reason given is that they're incredibly fast. They're really fast when you're creating a game. Performance is very important, right? You have frames per second to take care of. So it's important that you use a really fast language that can get you there with ease, essentially. What is the minimum required to get into a game development career? It would depend on what you mean by minimum requirement. Like, you definitely need to have a lot of experience into a lot of different aspects, because it depends. There are things that will be really physics oriented, things that are mathematical oriented, things that are into networking, into other aspects of gameplay, of input. So you definitely need to know a little bit about everything, a lot about input, about artificial intelligence, for example, physics, mathematics, a lot of things. You could actually look up the subfields of the development process. But if you know a little bit about everything, it should be enough to get you started in a game development career. Later on, you definitely want to focus on one aspect. So you want to be a physics programmer, for example, you want to really, really focus on physics, because that will help you when you're working professionally. And the last question here is, where can I get help regarding game development in case if I am stuck? Well, you can definitely, today is right. It's not the like it used to be back 10 or 20 years ago. You have so much support available nowadays. You have a lot of resources online. You have e-degrees like the one we offer. You have a lot of things that will definitely give you a lot of help if you are stuck with something. So I would definitely use your search ability to the best possible. Whenever you're curious about something, just search. Whenever you just get a random idea, how could I possibly do a first-person shooter, for example? How would the controls work? Look it up immediately. You want to constantly adapt and constantly learn and use the resources that you have available to you. What do you think as a game developer? Can we chase a career as a game developer or anything related to it? As I'm really interested in wanting to learn game development, making it my main career choice. Right. So I'm not sure if you're looking to shift your career or you're still deciding what your career is going to be. But is it a valid dream? It's absolutely a valid dream. It's absolutely possible. I don't see any reason that you would doubt yourself or think that you wouldn't succeed in that, except for maybe that you need a lot more motivation. You want to put yourself in the mentality that, yeah, I can do this. Once you put yourself in that mentality, you can definitely get through anything in that career. As a student, I'm playing Blender 3D and planning to learn the Unreal Engine, C++, and Unity engine. Absolutely. Blender is a great tool, by the way. It's a great tool for 3D art. Right. Could I make games as a side hustle? Absolutely. Actually, yes. A lot of people start that way, by the way, because it's a very scary step to make it your main career when you're not entirely sure where you stand yet, right? You're still learning. So you could definitely make it a side hustle. You could definitely have a main job and have game development on the side. And I can assure you, a lot of people ended up quitting their main job and switching to full-time game development that way, exactly that way. You can find a lot of examples online. You can look up independent developers that became successful. A lot of them actually started that way and then quit their main job and got into full-time game development because it started paying them so well, and it started proving to be that it actually would be able to sustain them in their life. All right. Can I use Assassin's Creed game characters like the hoods, blade, and well, it depends. Are you using the exact same characters? Because if you're using the exact same characters, you'd definitely be into trouble. But if you're using things that are similar, this is a tricky question. Notice that I'm not a lawyer and I don't have, I probably don't have the proper experience to answer that question properly. So you definitely have to look it up. But there is a chance you might be in trouble because something like the Hidden Blade is so unique to Assassin's Creed that it actually they might have some kind of legal angle that you're trying to clone or you're trying to copy their work, right? But again, I'm not a legal expert, so definitely make sure to look into that. Try to get, if you're actually creating a game and you get serious about it, absolutely hire a lawyer. Have a lawyer by your side, have some kind of attorney that can that has some knowledge and understanding in copyright and trademark laws, and that can help you in case you get into trouble for something like that. And something that's very important to note is that anyone can sue you, right? Even if they don't, even if they're not going to win the lawsuit, it's possible that you get sued. They don't have to have a valid reason for it. Maybe the reason is not valid, but you're still possibly going to get sued. You'd eventually win, but it will cost you in the process. So a general good rule is to try to avoid things that might be risky or might cause a lawsuit, even if you're sure that you're going to win that lawsuit, unless you know that you can actually take that kind of legal challenge and you can get through it. Right. Oh, of course, it's my pleasure. Guys, thank you so much. Look, I know that the absolutely. I'm glad you think so. So I am sorry if you found it a little bit really business oriented or really focused on business, but it's extremely important. I can assure you, if you're looking into that career seriously, these are things you definitely want to know. Hey, I want to start making a 2D fighting game, but I don't know where to start. I know C++, but I don't know game development. You might want to look into something like the Unreal Game Engine or CryEngine. They're both using C++. So you could use the knowledge for that. Or you could use things that use also C# like Unity, because they're both C languages, and C languages are extremely similar to each other. I would argue that actually programming with C# and Unity is a bit easier than C++ when you're using Unreal. How realistic would it be for me to build a small profitable game if I'm only play games? Well, the game knowledge will definitely help you. The web development experience is extremely helpful. I have a lot of people that I know that actually came from a web development background and managed to get into game development relatively easy. So you're already in a development field. It's definitely within your reach. Like it's much easier than if you were starting from scratch. All right, guys, I'm afraid I'm out of time. I'll try to answer this one last question, but I don't think I can get into any more. I have a story ready. How can I prepare a prototype? You'd probably want to work on your game design before the prototype. So the next stage, you have a story. The next stage is to figure out what the gameplay is going to be like. You want to figure out what your game is going to have to offer to the player. Because when you have a story, there's a really good question of, will you be able to make a gameplay to match that story? Some things are really, really story focused. You have an amazing story, but the gameplay is a bit difficult to fit into that story. This is something like Plague Tales or Plague Tale Innocence, or things that are really, really story focused. The Last of Us, for example, you'll notice that the ammo in the game is really limited, the ammunition you get, because you're not supposed to focus on the gameplay. You're supposed to focus on the story. So you want to look into getting your game design on board, understanding what your game is going to be like, and then preparing a prototype after that is actually quite easy. You'll find a lot of resources for it. And I think you're actually, obviously, you're going to have to get into some kind of game engine. I'm not sure if you have development experience or not yet, but it's definitely manageable and you'll find a lot of content for it. Guys, I still highly recommend the e-degree. The link is still in the chat. The offer is still on the screen. Let me know if you think it'll be helpful for you, because I think it's a very, very amazing career kicker or career starter. Thank you so much for attending. I'm glad you stuck with us so far, and I'm just going to give the mic back to Eduonix. One second. This is what, by the way, the Q&A session. Let me know if you guys have any other questions until they respond. Oh, please, it's a pleasure, guys. Thank you. Right. That basically concludes our session. The offer, I'm actually gonna keep the offer on the screen for a second. Let me just double check real quick and I will get back to you. I'm glad you guys loved it. Look, I know it was boring to some. I saw someone up there, someone up there wrote that it was boring. And I know, believe me, but trust me, it is extremely important. You have to really get into that. All right, thank you guys. Let me just double check one last second. Okay, it looks like we're just having, yeah, they disconnected due to a network issue. That's why they didn't end the call. So I'm going to go ahead and end it from my side. Thank you guys again for attending so much. And I hope that the info was useful to you. And I can assure you, you put a little bit more effort into that, you're going to be amazing game developers. Chase your dreams. Don't let it just be, don't let them just be dreams. Just go for it. Maybe don't go don't go for a full-time position in game development yet, or full-time independent development. The idea that was mentioned earlier about having a main job and then having game development on the side is really great. Thank you guys, and yeah, that concludes our session. You have a great day, and okay, someone wants to take a screenshot. I'll wait. I'll wait. Let me know once you do. But honestly, thank you guys so much for attending, and it's been a huge pleasure. All right, I trust you've taken the screenshot by now. I'm just gonna send you the, here it is. Okay, cool. I just sent the coupon code just in case. All right, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.